Welcome to Loyalty360's Thought Leadership and Loyalty series. In this episode, Loyalty360 CEO Mark Johnson speaks with Lior Arussy, author, visionary, and Stativity Group founder, about his new book, Next is Now: 5 Steps for Embracing Change. Now here's Mark Johnson.
Lior, thanks for taking the time to meet with us today. A very interesting book that you just released. Maybe tell us a little bit about the book, your position, and how you came about writing the book.
Sure. So in the last 16 years, at Stativity, we were involved with over 200 transformation programs with leading global brands around the world. And when you look at, how do you make an organization customer-centric? How do you have them build customer loyalty? How do you have them deliver exceptional customer experiences? You would think that customer centricity should not be a topic that will be that difficult to implement in an organization because it's kind of common sense. We're all customers, we all do it, and so on and so forth. And yet we saw the challenge and the struggle that employees and organizations had with the whole notion of evolving toward customer centricity. And we said, if this, the most common sense change, is such a big issue, what happened to the other things? And then we started to navigate into it, and based on the learning and the lessons of leading over 200 transformations around the world, it was very, very clear that there is a different approach for change if we want to be successful. In fact, in a study that we have done with Harvard Business Review, where we benchmarked 422 organizations, only 9% have stated that their change programs have been successful. Now, if you substitute the word change with the word strategy, that is a very, very scary number. I mean, 91% of the organization were saying, we're putting those strategies out there, but they're not happening. They're not happening the way we need to. So that was kind of the trigger to write the book, but where I probably go a little bit more emotional than just the rational fact I just shared with you is that we saw employees struggling with common sense change and being victims to the situation as opposed to taking ownership of the situation. And we wanted to develop a platform for them to not just live with change, not just survive change, but rather thrive to change and keep the relevance in the marketplace and for their organizations. So there was definitely a rational aspect of it, which is companies are not succeeding with implementing new strategies through change, and employees are becoming victims, and it's time for them to be inspired by change and not be threatened by it.
So you mentioned a change program and common sense. Is the change program a strategy program, or is it looking at the environment that brands find themselves today and being able to deal with disruption, being agile? Can you define what a change program is?
That's an excellent point, because in the book we actually talk about the new corporate capability called change resilience. And change resilience is the scope and speed in which an organization responds to the changes around them, to the technologies around them, to the opportunities around them. And what you see is that the large group of organizations are actually designed to repel change. They're designed to push out any type of change in the name of predictability and consistency. What happened is they're craving predictability and consistency, and as a result of it are sticking to what we know as best practices. By definition, best practices are old processes that we have validated through years of execution, and guess what? They are not really preparing us for the future. They are actually holding us back. We're not future ready. And the book is talking about how to develop change resilience, both as an individual and as an organization. So change is the combination of the external change that you have to respond to and be future ready, as well as the internal change that is being driven through strategies and programs and initiatives that organizations and individuals are fighting.
And I think
that makes sense?
Absolutely, yes. And I think you and I have spoken about this in the past. One of the challenges we see, and you probably see this as well, that there are so many different technologies, processes. I mean, the Technologyscape just came out earlier this week, late last week. 6,800 different technologies, right? It's grown from a couple hundred 10 years ago. So everyone out there has new technology, a new process, a new idea. it's revolutionary, it's going to change the world, but they speak to it in a different jargon, semantics, vernacular, and it creates confusion, which creates cortisol. So, in as much as I think brands would like to be proactive and marketers like to be kind of cutting edge, they're having a challenge just understanding what the new technologies is, how to use it, does it truly drive the ROI and program implementation that they want? So how do we deal with that from a kind of a macro level? Because that's what we see is so many brands struggle with the different processes, technologies, ideologies out there. They have a hard time getting to change.
It's an excellent point because my background is in technology. I was with HP for many years. I was with other technology companies for many years. And I have to tell you one thing. Technology companies have their financial targets, and they don't really care what is going to happen outside of selling more licenses or selling more seats or so on and so forth. And it is the responsibility of the buyers to really filter those new technologies through what I would consider to be the eternal, never ever changing rules of running a business.
Right.
And it doesn't matter what the change is, and it doesn't matter what the technology is, you need to be disciplined with the very basic rules of business. And the first one is you need to attract and retain customers. Without it, you don't have a business. Okay? Those who are not focused on that are not going to be successful. And the second one is a disciplined management of your costs in the context of acquiring and retaining customers. Whenever a new technology comes in, you've got to look at it from those lenses and try to figure out how does it help me achieve my goals. So that is layer one. Layer two, as we see it become very, very critical in today's and in the future organizations, is living with a purpose, living with a sense of meaning, making an impact and difference on the world. And again, you look at these technologies in that context. In fact, in the book, we're outlining the 5 steps which we call future-ready impact, that is walking organizations through exactly that type of discipline. The first step is you've got to face the reality and look at the trends and look at the opportunities, but also through the lenses of your customer needs, your customer aspirations, your brand focus, and so on and so forth. The second one is recognizing the emotional entanglement that potentially can hold you back from implementing or taking advantage of those opportunities. The third is developing your customer compass, which I call the core cause. The moment you know what your core cause is, it becomes the right filter for you to understand, do I need this technology or not? The next one, step 4, is all about applying the new technology to my day-to-day realities, to my day-to-day interactions and engagements with my customers. Does it fit there? Is it going to work? And then the last one is actually keeping your mind in experimentation mode in order to make sure that you don't get into or sunk into the notion of best practices, but constantly focus on next practices. But to answer in short your question, the eternal rules of business are never going to change. You need to generate revenue. It comes from existing and new customers. Does it help you achieve that or not? Other than if it doesn't, then it's a toy.
Excellent. You say in your book that change is no longer an event, but the new norm. Can you just maybe expand on that a little bit, what that means to you?
Absolutely. For many, many years, organizations had the privilege of having one strategy that they will implement, a new upgrade of the new ERP system, and it will be an event, and everybody's going to work hard to go through it with the expectation that after that we're going to go into these very calm waters and reality will become much more relaxed. We don't have that anymore. The amount of new technologies, the amount of new opportunities, the amount of disruption to business models is so significant and so fast that organizations need to start looking at change not as a one event, a difficult one that I need to go through and after that life is going to get back to its normal, but rather the new normal is change. The new normal is the next. The new normal is constantly evaluating those, determining which one you want to use, which one will make you future ready and relevant to your customers, and which one is just a toy. I'm not blaming the technology guys for throwing a whole bunch of ideas and jargon out there, but the responsibility is on the buyers and the users to go and check if it's even relevant. And even if you're, let's say, having an Instagram account, which you will tell me is not really costing you anything, it does. It's resources, it's time, and it's time away from other things that can be meaningful for your customers. So going back to that is, yes, you're gonna be bombarded. We're all familiar with this concept called FOMO, fear of missing out, and that anxiety is taking over what should be a disciplined approach of reviewing what the future is like, selecting what is helpful for you with your cause and purpose, and letting go of the rest.
Excellent. So why is it that people are so afraid of change? Obviously, we know a lot of great books out there about habit and cortisol and humans being kind of inherently rational. You create habits to lower stress, because if you had to make a decision about everything you do throughout the day, you would be in a constant state of fear, correct? But how do people, look at change, and why are they so afraid of change, and how can we get that socialized or bring that to the fore that it becomes more accepted?
So let me share with you just a funny anecdote. So the one place I did not find a change management program is in the New York lottery. Somehow, when you win the lottery, nobody's coming to the New York lottery and saying, "Hey, it's too much change in my life. I can't handle it. How about you paying me really in small increments because I'm not ready for the change?" Everybody's embracing it. So we kind of have a little bit of a selective approach to change. Let's face it. Nobody prepared us for Facebook, but when we embraced it, we went all out, and nobody needed a 5-steps approach to getting used to Facebook, if you know what I mean by that. Yeah. So here's what we discovered, and the book is talking about it in a very big way. Most of the change programs are focusing on future activities, behaviors, practices. So we need to move you from using the old version to the new version, or from the old software to the new one, and so on and so forth. What we found out through training and working with over 1 million employees in the last 16 years is that when they hear the word change, they often associate it with a negative judgment on their past. So if I was a cashier at a bank, and now the bank decided to shut down cashier, who am I? Where do I file the last 20 years? Are the last 20 years a mistake? These are the struggles. While most change programs are focusing on future behaviors, the real struggle starts with the past behavior. The real struggle for employees is, where do I file the past? What does it mean to my identity? Because a lot of employees are associating themselves with the process that they use or the tool that they use, not necessarily with the impact that they make on the customers. And the book is helping them split and separate the cause from the process. And the moment you see your cause continue to happen, it frees you up to experiment with new tools and with new processes. So we need to establish that constant in our life, that we always are there to make an impact on customers, and then it frees us up to experiment with other things. And that's one of the big aha moments for a lot of participants in our programs, when they recognize, actually not everything is changing. What I stand for doesn't change. It's really just the tools. And when you separate the purpose from the tools, it makes it much easier to adapt further.
Excellent. Why do most change programs not succeed? What are the challenges that you see from your 16 years in developing these programs and processes that work?
So, couple of things. First of all, most change programs are top-down programs, which basically open the door for employees to play victimhood. And when they play victimhood, they are resisting. They are resisting consciously or subconsciously. In the book, we talk about the 6 different personalities of change resistance. People are using very sophisticated, very creative methods to basically say, no, I don't want to do that. Playing busy, playing the sales card, playing the non-invented here card, all whole type of cards. And the book is helping those who are trying to drive change to actually identify those personalities and develop strategies to address them. But the failure starts with the fact that when you do it top-down, employees are playing as a victim, they're passive, and they don't really absorbing it. And we're challenging the organizations to focus on what we call employee-led transformations as opposed to CEO-led transformations. So that's problem number 1. Problem number 2, there is no way or there's no method in which to bring the employees into the decision. And in the book, we're actually recommending a whole exercise called Sit in the CEO Seat. and where we are challenging them to face the same trends and see what would they come up with when they will hear about those trends. And they most of the time realize that they will come up with the same exact solution that the CEO came up with. There's also a lack of recognition of the emotional side of change. Corporate do not like emotions. They, the old cliche remains strong, which is, it's business, it's not personal. It is personal for employees. And if you're not going to recognize that emotional part, they're not going to be able to overcome it and move forward. The third element, as I mentioned, is the fear of filing the past as opposed to the fear of moving forward. So how do you help people see a connection between the past and the future? How do you create a sense of evolution? The last one that I would say to you is the notion of practice. So you tell employees what you want them to do and you explain to them what you want them to do, but until they practice in a safe zone, they're not ready to go and implement it because they don't want to be embarrassed. And that's another area of failure that organizations are going through.
Interesting. So you talk about the personas that you see in your book. Can you maybe talk a little bit about the different personas and kind of what they mean? And is it hard to understand them, or are they're pretty clear cut and easy to understand?
No, you can actually see through their behaviors what it's all about. It's just that you need to look at them through very fresh lenses and not try to create a status quo in your organization. So one persona, for example, that I talk in the book about is the staller. He will not say that this transformation is stupid, but he's going to try to stall the efforts of actions in the name of additional research and additional analysis. And he'll drive the organization into analysis paralysis because he does not want the activities in the transformation to take place. And when you recognize who the staller is and how they behave, there's a certain recommendation about how to approach them and how to call their bluff. There's the sales guy, the sales guy that always says, "Hey, my territory, I don't need any of that. So you go do it somewhere else, but in my territory, you don't need that." And they're playing the sales card, and they're going to the CEO and saying, "If you're going to do this change, I'm not going to make my numbers." And that is really a blackmail approach that we absolutely do not like. Then you got the busy bee, the guy who's so busy with so many meetings to the point that he has absolutely no time whatsoever to go and embrace it. And we need to get them out of the firefighting mode and into the more strategic thinking. But these people are thriving on firefighting. These people love to be busy because, that's how they define themselves, and they need to have a transition towards the new way of thinking. The engineer, which is, it's all about, it's not invented here. I did not come up with the idea, so it's a bad idea. And again, we are calling their bluff as well by engaging them and helping them develop some of the ideas. And the last one is the veteran, the guy who's been there for a long time. They're probably very close to retirement. The last thing on earth they need right now is a big change. So they're fighting it because they're trying to do that in the name of tradition and heritage and everything else. But the net of it is they are really mentally already retired, and they're holding back the organizations from being relevant in the future because that future is not part of their future.
Excellent. In the book, you talk a little bit about the change to, the secret to change is engagement. Can you define what engagement means and then maybe how those two are connected?
So that's a very interesting topic, and we are releasing in a book a study that we have done with 30,000 employees in order to understand where engagement is. And you would think that employee engagement falls in the category of very traditional thinking around compensation. Would you bring your friend to work here? Is your manager really inspirational? All of those are good, but they're table stakes. What we found is that the engagement is actually coming from a different source. And the source is the ability to make an impact in my work and mostly on somebody's lives. And the moment you recognize that people are actually driven to engage and go above and beyond, when they actually feel that they have a power and they're not powerless, then you're opening a whole set of opportunities to inspire your employees and connect and provide them a line of sight between the customers that they are impacting and the type of work that they do. And in the book, I tell the story of an individual from an IT department of a pharmaceutical company who wanted to excuse himself from our program because he doesn't do customers. And when I showed him how the IT infrastructure that it's building is actually making the drugs available to customers, to patients who desperately need it right now. And if he takes another half an hour, half an hour to eat lunch, it comes at the expense of a patient who's suffering and doesn't have access to the right drugs. You could see the light bulbs. I mean, the guy's like, oh my gosh. I'm responsible to people. So I think that when we see that engagement is really about making an impact and the power to make an impact on people, it really opens up a whole new set of opportunities for people to reconsider their level of efforts and engagement that they're willing to put in their work, and opens up a huge opportunity for engagement. It's not about benefits. It's not about, all of these things are table stakes. It's about the ability to look yourself in the end of the day in the mirror and say, today I didn't push 20 different papers or send 50 different emails. Today I was privileged to be part of the life of 20 people and was able to make a difference in that.
Excellent. Another point kind of interesting you talk about is the idea of communicating with customers. How can brands, marketers, those who have an interest in customer loyalty, customer experience, use this book or use some lessons gleaned from this book to communicate better with their customers?
So I think we need to recognize first that the pendulum have shifted in a radical way, not just in an incremental way. Customers are now in charge. And the new authorities are not brands in the form of logos. The new authorities are people who are speaking about your brand. And therefore, you can only connect correctly when humans are speaking to humans. Let me give you a simple example. I find it absolutely fascinating that if I want to go to Boston or Chicago or Miami, there will be millions of people who would trust somebody's back room in his apartment over the local Hilton or Marriott, who have invested decades to establish their brand as the right destination for hospitality. And you think about it, why would somebody trust Airbnb, which is less than a decade-old brand, and an individual with a room in his apartment over all these big brands? And I think it's a wake-up call for all the other brands to understand that the new authorities are about peer-to-peer, human-to-human connections. And that calls for a totally different relationship with our employees and the way we engage them to tell the story and to be part of the story and to embody the story and to embody the message, because they are the ones who are going to be able to connect. Not the logo, not the abstract design that you got from your branding agency. It's about your people, and it's about your dialogue, and it's about your stories. So by connecting your employees to the notion of making an impact, you're empowering them, and you should structure the role to start connecting and creating a human narrative between people and people.
Interesting. One of the chapters that really resonated with me is like the do the human thing first. Maybe talk a little more about what that means and how organizations can do that, both for employees and customers.
So do the human thing first came from a very interesting challenge. When you ask employees to engage with customers and create exceptional customer experiences, you can't really script it because you don't really know what will be the next customer's emotional state, expectations, difficulty. So they might have struggled with the same issue from a process standpoint, but the emotional context is very, very different. And employees who want to feel safe in daring to treat the customers well needed some guidance, needed some parameters to how do I do that? And that's when we invented the concept of do the human thing first. By focusing more and more about the humans and the emotions, we can connect better to the customers. And sometimes, by the way, when we are helpless and we cannot solve the problem, we can still provide an empathy and human connection that will make it a bit easier. I remember having a conversation with a group of flight attendants, and they said, all the customer wants is an upgrade. And in fact, this premium economy section, we call it the I can't believe I wasn't upgraded section, because these are the most bitter customers who wanted to be upgraded to business class or first class and were not. And we talked about, what can we do with them? And we talked about the notion of emotional upgrade as opposed to physical upgrade. The physical upgrades will eventually run out, but the emotional upgrades do not. So if we can connect with them and create the human thing first for them, we want to send a message to the employees. When a company is actually embracing the do the human thing first, it's a safety net for employees. If this is the right thing to do, then go ahead and do it, and we'll back you up. And the do the human thing first should also tap into your intrinsic understanding of human beings, because we are all human beings, and we should not be ignoring that repository of knowledge and empathy when we are in the workplace.
And if you could give one piece of advice from the book that would help kind of lead the change, transformation that would create some momentum within the organization, because books like this have a lot of great insight, but a lot of organizations struggle with like getting that one piece going, getting something that's measurable that allows them to do the next thing. If you could recommend one thing to brands, kind of depending if they're just starting this process, what would you recommend to them, and how can they use that to truly create the transformation that you're referencing?
So my advice to brands and organizations is very, very simple. Engage your employees early and intensively at the beginning of the process. Turn it into an employee-led transformation, not a top-down transformation. Whatever you'll invest on the upfront, you'll save on the back end on fixing and engaging and fighting cynicism. My advice to individuals is drop the victimhood. You cannot afford continuing to be the victim when change is coming. Fighting change is only making you irrelevant. You've got to embrace it and make it relevant to yourself.
Excellent. Well, Lior, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you.
It was very interesting to hear, and obviously a lot of great insight within the book. And look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Same here. Thank you very much.